Good morning. I want to talk today about the solar return chart for Donald Trump. And in my experience, the solar return chart, it is a moment in time that has a special emphasis because the sun has returned to where it was at the time of your birth. So that creates sort of a special emphasis or intensity to things. And this emphasis, it tends to work in the background uh, pretty strongly for the next 6 months. And then for the second 6 months, its influence begins to wane as we begin to sense or perceive reflections of what will be at our next solar return. So, the solar return, it creates a particular emphasis for the coming year, operates fairly strongly for at least 6 months. But after that moment passes, the moment of that solar return, it operates somewhat in the background, coloring everything. And current transits operate more in the foreground. So let me see if I can share my screen and we'll get started. This will take just a second. I've got to get rid of some panels so I can see what I'm doing. And hold on. Almost there. And we're ready. So this is the solar return of Donald Trump. Now, before I get into his actual solar return, I want to take a look at his natal chart. I'll quickly go over his natal chart and also the inauguration chart for his second term. That sets the stage for everything that's going on. Now, in Trump's natal chart, you can see that he has Sun conjunct the North Node, conjunct Uranus, and Gemini in the 10th house. Sun conjunct Uranus, this can make him very erratic, a master of chaos. With these planets in Gemini, his mind is always jumping around, doing what he calls the weave. And in a single conversation, he will often in mid-sentence jump from one topic to another. With these planets conjunct the North Node in the 10th house, he has an insatiable desire for power. Now, Trump was also born just a few hours before a lunar eclipse, and that just intensifies everything. This lunar nodal axis just adds intensity to things, and this is the first hint we see that he often sees the world in terms of himself versus others. Uh, it is natural for him to frame everything in terms of an opposition. He has Saturn conjunct Venus in his 11th house, very close to the cusp of his 12th house. And Venus rules his 10th house of status, power, and position in society. With Saturn conjunct Venus, this is the one area of his life where he shows some discipline. When it comes to enhancing his own power and status, he can be very disciplined. Uh, this is also why he often is drawn to strong men and dictators. He loves people who exert control over others. And with Venus in the 11th house, he engages, he seeks collaborations with others in order to enhance his own power. However, Venus and Saturn, they're in Cancer. Consequently, he is actually deep down inside very insecure about his status and power. And we see that in how he needs constant reinforcement. We have all seen those cabinet meetings that begin with everyone seated at the table. They just go around in a circle, offering praise to Trump, letting him know what a wonderful leader he is, what a wonderful job he's doing what a genius he is. It reminds me of the kind of adulation that the leader of North Korea often has to get in order to feel secure. Now he has Mars conjunct his ascendant in Leo, and so Trump is also by nature very assertive, very aggressive, very combative, and in particular, combative in defense of his own ego. He does have some good aspects. Jupiter and Chiron make a trine to Uranus in his 10th house. This gives him a lot of luck when it comes to status and power. He has a lot of good luck. Also, this conjunction of Chiron with Jupiter and trining Uranus, it can bring out the sweeter side of Chiron, the more transcendent side, the side that wants to heal. And he can be very soothing and healing and nurturing to those that he currently likes. He can put on the charm with people. But we'll see later on that there is a way in which Chiron gets involved in oppositions that bring out the worst of Chiron, resulting in him wounding a lot of people. Okay, here's a very interesting thing in his natal chart. He basically has the Sun-Uranus North Node conjunction about 30 degrees away from Saturn and Venus, which is about 30 degrees away from Mars and the ascendant. A consequence of this is that whenever a transit is making a bad aspect to one part of this configuration, it's always making a good aspect to another part. For example, if something is squaring his sun here, then it's going to be making a trine to Saturn and Venus. If something is squaring Saturn and Venus, it's going to make a sextile to Sun, North Node Uranus, and a trine to Mars. A consequence of this is that every time he gets into trouble, something or someone throws him a lifeline. And so all his life, he has tended to fail up. He has had numerous bankruptcies, and yet he always comes out better in the end. And that is because with every difficulty we have in his natal chart, there's a good aspect that is throwing him a lifeline. Now, something about Trump's natal chart, which is not so obvious to other people, is that he has an awful lot of 11th harmonic aspects in his natal chart. And this means that his 11th harmonic chart will tend to be very active in his life. Harmonic charts are like auxiliary personalities that can develop over time as we deal with all the things that life throws at us. And in the 11th harmonic, people tend to be restless. When your 11th harmonic chart is active, that chart is going to show you things that you're somewhat restless about, and you're eager to get on with these things. You're eager to engage certain things. You don't stay still when the 11th harmonic is active. And his 11th harmonic chart is going to be very telling. As you can see, it is dominated by oppositions. And Chiron is involved in these oppositions as well as Pluto. And this tells you an awful lot about why Trump is the way he is. With everything in life, if there is something he wants, he will begin by seeing it as a contest or an opposition between himself and others. Even if you're his friend, if there's something that he really wants from you, he will turn that into an opposition, just as he has done as president with America's allies. Now, once he establishes this opposition, the next step is to wound and hurt the people or entities that he is dealing with. Obviously, he does that, so as he sees it, he will have the advantage and they will be disadvantaged. So he wounds, hurts, weakens what he sees as his opponent. He is then negotiating with advantage and is often able to force an outcome that favors him much more than it favors the other side. So this is why Trump is the way he is when it comes to negotiating and getting what he wants. And this is why Trump winds up wounding and hurting a lot of other people in spite of that beneficial trine and beneficial conjunction of Jupiter with Chiron in his natal chart. His 11th harmonic is very active. He's restless. He wants to move, get certain things done, and he does it by seeing the world versus himself. It's always himself versus others. He wounds and hurts them, and in that way tries to get what he wants. Okay, now let's take a quick look at his inauguration chart. And if Harris had won the presidency instead of Trump, it would have been the same inauguration chart. But you can rest assured that she would have manifested all these influences in a different way. Now, with regard to Trump, if we look at this inauguration chart, we see Sun strongly conjunct Pluto in the 10th house, and that's also conjunct the midheaven. So, as president this time around, he seeks power. This will be a very powerful presidency and a very transformative presidency for good or bad. Okay, we certainly see that happening. Interestingly, there is a conjunction between Saturn and Venus in this chart. Saturn is in the 11th house, Venus in the 12th house. This conjunction straddles the cusp of the 12th house. This is very reminiscent of the Saturn-Venus conjunction in Trump's natal chart. In that natal chart, Venus ruled his 10th house. And as I say, that's the one area of his life in which Trump has shown discipline and calculation when it comes to getting power and status. In this inauguration day chart, Saturn rules the 10th house. So it's all pretty much the same interpretation. He is very disciplined about his own power and status. He will strong arm his way to get more power. With Saturn and Venus in Pisces this time, and with the 12th house influence, he is also often operating in the shadows. A lot of things he is doing are very dubious with regard to their legality. And he is doing much of his work in the shadows, imprisoning people, wanting to send people to Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, prisons in other countries, just some awful stuff. But definite resonance here between the conjunction that is in his natal chart. And Neptune is in the 12th house, conjunct the lunar nodal axis, and that is just going to intensify everything I just said. It intensifies these behind the scenes maneuvers, the shadow government, the lies, the propaganda, the misinformation. Now, in this inauguration chart, we also see Uranus in the first house. And his presidency has been very disruptive. It's revolutionary in the sense that it is chaotic, and he is breaking apart structures. Now, imagine if Harris were president, the influence of Pluto would have been more toward positive transformation rather than power and destruction. The influence of Uranus would be expressed more in terms of creativity and innovation. But for now, we are where we are. This is also very interesting. He has a T-square, Chiron and Eris in opposition to the moon, and both of those square Mercury. Chiron, in this case, will most likely cause wounding, Eris, strife, and Chiron in the 12th house could also cause self-undoing for Trump. His attempts to wound other people could backfire on him ultimately. But with Chiron opposite the moon, he will wound a lot of people. He will wound our allies and relations. This is in Libra, the sign of partnerships. And the moon is in the 6th house, so he will probably wound the workers in this country. Mercury in the 9th house, this represents commerce, communication with others, and our allies. And we have all seen how he is wounding American workers and our allies with his tariff policies. So far, it hasn't been quite as bad as it could be. He threatens, he puts on tariffs, the market goes down. Some countries come in to negotiate with him. If they arrive at some sort of agreement, the market goes back up. But so far, these agreements, they have lowered the initial tariffs, but not eliminated the tariffs. And that means that Americans will still eventually wind up paying higher prices for things. So this kind of wounding, it's going to be a characteristic of this second term for Donald Trump. And I think this is the last thing in the inauguration chart. He has Mars. It has Mars in Cancer, conjunct the cusp of the 4th house. The 4th house has to do with the homeland and its people. And what has Trump been doing? He has been waging a war against many of the people in this country. He is trying to deport thousands of people from this country. And as we have seen, some of them are babies or young children that are actually American citizens. He has tried to militarize the southern border. He signed an executive order making the entire southern border a military base. I think that's going through the courts, perhaps still. But he did that so that if people from other countries step onto that southern border, he can immediately arrest them for trespassing. And he has sent in, most recently, Marines into cities in order to put down protests. And of course, on his birthday, he will have this huge military parade in Washington, D.C. So if we look at Trump's natal chart, if we look at this inauguration day chart, it all fits like a glove, both with Trump's personality and with what he is doing now. Now let's take a look at that solar return chart. Just the chart itself, we're going to see a lot of the same themes emphasized, particularly themes having to do with power, intensity, disruption and chaos, and aggression. And sure enough, in the solar return chart, the sun is in the 10th house. It's pretty much conjunct the midheaven, and it's squaring the lunar nodal axis. So a lot of this year is going to be about Trump achieving as much power as he can. And the aspects to the nodal axis, that just intensifies everything. He has Uranus in the 9th house, disrupting relationships with others, with our allies abroad. It is making a very strong square to Mars, so chaos and aggression. Mars is in the 12th house. Hidden activities, trying to do things behind the scenes, but this aggression may be his self-undoing in the long run. So a lot of aggression, a lot of disruption. This can be a lot of anger that he feels, a lot of aggressive actions he takes. He could actually even have accidents, or there could be aggression directed towards him, as has happened in the past. All right, he has Jupiter in the 10th house. He wants to expand his power, his authority, his status, his control over things. But it is being strongly squared by Saturn and Neptune in the 7th house. The 7th house represents others. Others will try and restrict his unrestricted power. Others will have an ideology different from what he is espousing. Others will want a return to due process and law and order. That's not what Trump was. He wants his power to grow without any restrictions on it at all. He doesn't want any guardrails. Okay. Now, if we look at how the solar return chart is going to impact his natal chart, we can see that transiting Uranus at the time of his solar return, it's going to be in his 10th house, conjunct his midheaven. Again, chaos and disruption are going to reign here. And it is square not only transiting Mars, but also his natal Mars and his ascendant. So this will be a very manic presidency, even more manic than usual for Donald Trump. And it will be very chaotic. It will be very angry and aggressive. Those are characteristics he will exhibit this year. And he is going to be very disruptive. And as we have seen, he will often change his mind frequently. This amount of tariffs, one day, a different amount the next day. But there's going to be a lot of action, a lot of aggression, a lot of anger in the coming year, certainly over the next 6 months. And as I've said, this could be anger, aggression he exhibits towards others, or it could be violence directed at him. Now, his sun is, of course, exactly conjunct his natal sun, because this is a solar return. And that means that not only is the transiting sun making a strong square to this lunar nodal axis, his natal sun is doing the same. So again, this is just intensifying everything in his life, in the solar return chart, and in what he is currently doing. He also has the solar return midheaven strongly conjunct the north node, opposition to the south node and the moon. Again, this is reiterating and intensifying that thirst for power and status. He basically wants even more power than before this time around. And he wants to be able to expand that power without any restrictions, without any guardrails. He will be wounded in some ways, though, because Chiron and Eris are making a strong square to Saturn and Venus. So that is going to wound his power and status a bit. But as I've said, things often throw him a lifeline. He has Chiron and Eris making a strong trine to his Mars, so he will have some luck in using the military and other forces to get what he wants. I'm using really tight orbs for this, but if I use a little wider orb, we could say that his sun is it is making a sextile to things. This is in his natal chart, but it's also making kind of a wide sextile to this Mars that is transiting, even though I don't have it circled, but that is going to help throw him a lifeline for all of this. So, in a solar return chart, we see a lot of emphasis on aggression, on disruption and chaos, and on this thirst for power. You will get into trouble for some things, most likely, but other things are throwing him a lifeline. And now let's look at his progress chart at the time of a solar return. And this is what it looks like. And one thing I'll note is that in this progress chart set for the time of the solar return, he has Scorpio rising, and the ruler of Scorpio is Pluto. And look where it is in the 10th house conjunct that 10th house cusp, the midheaven. Again, he has quite a thirst for power at this point. He wants to be an all-powerful dictator. No question about it. Okay, this graph will show you his progressions for the rest of the year from June through December. And you can see a lot of things come to fruition in September and October. Mars conjunct Chiron, that could result in some wounding. Mars semi-square the ascendant, some aggression, accidents, or violence either from him or toward him. Mercury conjunct Mars, his rhetoric, his thinking will be very aggressive, very angry. Sun making a sextile to Mercury. That will be actually beneficial for clear thinking and communicating. But Sun semi-square Saturn, some frustrations going on, and the Moon making a semi-square to Neptune. That will be exact on October the 14th. October could be a month where he is more delusional than usual. Okay, so this is interesting. Keep an eye on Trump in the latter half of September and throughout October, because this is when these progress aspects become exact. And there may be a greater chance of certain things happening as we approach these dates. All right, if we look to see how this progress chart at the time of his solar return will affect his natal chart, well, we have progressed Uranus making a pretty strong conjunction with his natal sun and the north node. It's in opposition to the south node and the moon. Again, this tendency toward chaos and disruption. It's really being intensified at this time. He also has the progressed north node conjunct his natal Uranus, south node in opposition to it, another indication of this tendency toward chaos and disruption being intensified. We have seen multiple indicators of this. It is a very, very chaotic presidency this time around. He also has his progressed Venus and Jupiter, making a strong square to his natal Saturn and Venus. One thing this indicates is there has been a shift in his values over time, but it doesn't harmonize well with the core values that he began with. Furthermore, while for years he has worked in a very disciplined way to achieve status and power, that is the influence of Saturn in this natal chart. In his progressed chart, Saturn is being replaced by Jupiter. It's Jupiter over here that is conjunct Venus. He now wants his power and status to grow without any restrictions. He doesn't want to be disciplined. He wants everything just expanded automatically. And so that is going to create tension with something deep inside him. He is embarking upon a path which is not necessarily going to work out well for him in the end. Here is that Mercury conjunct his Mars. So again, that can result in more aggressive speaking, an angry mind, and also maybe a cold and calculating mind to get what he wants. And here we have Mars making a semi-square to his ascendant. So again, assertion, aggression, violence, either from him or toward him. And his progressed midheaven is conjunct his natal Pluto, another indication of his quest for absolute power. Okay. And we saw that when we looked at the progress chart, right? And let me go back to that just a second here. Yeah. And just the progress chart by itself, the ruler of the first house in the 10th, Pluto, conjunct the midheaven. So this is just yet another midheaven Pluto conjunction that we're seeing now. I think this is the last slide. I've shown this in some other presentations. The inner chart is the July 2nd, 1776 chart for America. July 2nd, because that is when the Continental Congress passed the resolution for independence. That is when the decision was made to be independent from Britain. However, if you put a July 4th Sibley chart in here instead, you're going to have the same astrological configuration that I'm going to point out. The middle chart is Donald Trump's natal chart, and the outer chart on this outer ring, that is going to be his progress chart, progress for the time of his solar return. And the most important thing we see in this chart is Mars conjunct Chiron conjunct Saturn. 14 degrees, 14 degrees, 14 degrees. Very strong. In his natal chart with Chiron conjunct Saturn, he has this tendency to wound the structures of our government, our relationships with our allies, since this is in Libra, and the structure of democracy. However, if you're a Trump supporter, you will interpret this differently. You will see him as simply dismantling the deep state and draining the swamp. So, different people can make different interpretations of this. I see it in terms of him destroying the structures of our democracy and our government. Others will interpret it as draining the swamp. Either way, with progress Mars conjunct these 2 points so strongly, and it's still an applying conjunction. It's not separating yet. With Mars conjunct these 2 planets so strongly, we're going to see this wounding or draining happening on steroids. That's been in effect ever since he began his second term, and it will be in effect for a while longer. So that is what the stars have to say about Trump's solar return, his progressions at that time, his natal chart, his inauguration chart. And basically what we see there is exactly what is happening. This is usually the case with Trump because Trump rarely exercises his free will. He never, hardly ever uses his free will to alter or mitigate an astrological influence. So whatever is happening in his chart astrologically, it just tends to manifest in an unfiltered way without any modification. And it's really hard to look at these charts and look at what is happening in America right now and not come to the conclusion that there is something to astrology. Okay, well, I will stop sharing my screen now. And that is it for Trump's solar return. If you have watched some of my other videos on Summer of Change Part 1, Summer of Change Part 2, you know that the world and America are going through a very momentous time. What happens this summer is somewhat of a preview for what to expect next year when we have the exact Saturn-Neptune conjunction and we have exact trines between Uranus and Pluto. Everything is pretty much unfolding exactly as the astrology predicts. And so these extreme times, they really showcase how well, effectively, astrology is in guiding some of the actions in this world. A consequence of scientific research is that most astrological configurations, their effect size is actually fairly small. They're not like gravity, where, you know, if you jump out of a plane, you're going to fall to the earth. There's no question about it. You know, you cannot exercise your free will to change that fact. So it's actually to our benefit that astrological influences are not all that strong when we consider just a single aspect or a single interaction between planets. Because they're not so overly strong, we're able to exercise free will and mitigate the outcome and make the outcome better. But when you have so many astrological indicators all pointing in the same direction, the effect size gets larger. The impact that is felt is stronger. And it's when you have these extreme things going on astrologically that you will find them mirrored in the world by extreme circumstances and outcomes. And this is when you can really see astrology working, astrology in action. And that is the kind of time we're in. So, I hope you found this video informative. I hope you watch my other videos on Summer of Change Part 1, Summer of Change Part 2, that will help you understand better the times we're currently going through and what may lie ahead. But for now, I'll just go ahead and stop this, and so I'll just say so long and be well. And please watch those other videos too. Okay, that's it. So long.